House That Whispers. A story. There are places in the world that exist just outside of time, places where the walls seem to breathe and the floors creak under invisible weight. One such place was the Morrow House, abandoned decades ago. It stood deep within a forest, its crumbling walls wrapped in ivy and mist. For Jack and Leah, it was supposed to be a simple night, a dinner party with a promised reward. But Morrow House had its own plans for them. The couple stood in front of the house, the sky above darkening with storm clouds. The old mansion loomed, its windows broken, its structure slowly being consumed by the forest around it. Jack held a golden invitation in his hand, its elegant script shimmering in the rain. It read, "Survive the night. The reward is yours." As they approached the door, Leah hesitated, feeling a chill that wasn't just from the weather. But they had come this far, and turning back now wasn't an option. Jack pushed the heavy, ornate door open, and the two stepped inside. Inside, the grand foyer greeted them with an eerie stillness. A dusty chandelier hung above, its dim lights flickering, casting long shadows across the cracked marble floor. Leah looked around, noticing the portraits that lined the walls, stern faces from another time, their eyes seeming to follow the couple as they walked. They weren't alone. 3 other guests stood awkwardly in the room: a businessman, an elderly man with a cane, and a nervous college student. Each of them had also received the mysterious invitation, drawn here by the promise of a fortune. There was no host, no explanation, just the 5 of them, standing in the decaying mansion as the storm outside rumbled. Then, a voice crackled through an old speaker mounted high on the wall. It was distant, cold, and disembodied.
"Welcome, guests. The house will test you. Survive the night, and you may leave with your reward. Fail and you may never leave at all."
The voice faded into static, leaving the group standing in uneasy silence. Jack and Leah exchanged a glance, their earlier excitement now tinged with doubt. They followed the others down a long hallway, the walls around them seeming to twist and bend in unnatural ways. The peeling wallpaper revealed strange, dark marks underneath scratches, like something had clawed at the walls. The flickering lights cast strange, moving shadows, making the house feel alive. Leah shivered, feeling like they were being watched. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually they found themselves in a large room. The door slammed shut behind them with a loud bang, echoing through the house. Jack tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. The room was a maze. Wooden walls stood before them, with narrow passages twisting in every direction. Lanterns hung from the walls, their dim light flickering as if about to go out at any moment. As they ventured deeper into the maze, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The walls seemed to shift when no one was looking, and the shadows moved as if they had a life of their own. Leah felt a strange sensation, like someone was calling her name, whispering softly from the darkness. She stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. Ahead of her, just beyond the flickering light, was a figure. It was a woman. Her back turned to Leah. The figure was familiar, too familiar. It was her sister. But her sister had died years ago. Leah's breath caught in her throat as the figure slowly turned. But before she could see its face, the light flickered out, plunging the maze into darkness. Leah wasn't the only one haunted by the house. As they navigated the maze, the other guests began to see things, too. Jack found himself standing in a narrow hallway, the walls covered in soot. At the end of the hall, a figure appeared engulfed in flames. It was his father, just as he had been the night he died. Jack froze, unable to move as the burning figure slowly walked toward him, the flames flickering and crackling unnaturally, casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. Elsewhere, the businessman saw the ghostly image of his estranged wife standing in the corner of a dark room, her face filled with disappointment. The college student stared into a mirror, her reflection showing her younger self, smiling sinisterly, mocking her. The house wasn't just testing their courage, it was digging into their pasts, unearthing their deepest regrets and fears. Leah found herself alone in a dimly lit study, the others lost somewhere in the house's twisted corridors. On a dusty desk, she discovered an old, worn leather journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky and faded. As she flipped through the journal, Leah felt a growing sense of dread. The entries spoke of others who had stayed in the house before them, guests who had come for the reward, just like them, but none of them had ever left. The last entry sent a chill down her spine. "We are still living, still breathing, but never leaving." Leah looked up, catching a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a figure reflected in the mirror behind her, watching silently from the shadows. The remaining guests found themselves gathered in the dining room, seated around a long, dusty table. A single candle flickered in the center, its weak light barely illuminating their faces. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the room. The voice from the speaker returned, cold and unfeeling.
"Only one of you may leave. The others must remain."
Tension filled the room as the guests began to argue, fear and paranoia overtaking them. They turned on each other, desperate to survive. Leah sat quietly, watching as the others descended into chaos. Jack, too, remained silent, his mind racing. They had to find a way out together, but the house wanted them to tear each other apart. It thrived on fear, on mistrust. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Leah stepped outside, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The mist clung to the ground, and the sky was a pale blue, the storm having passed. Behind her, the Morrow House loomed, dark and empty. She had made it. She had survived. But as Leah walked away from the house, something felt wrong. The air was still too still. She glanced at a shop window as she passed, and her heart skipped a beat. In the reflection, her face smiled back at her, but Leah wasn't smiling. The reflection's eyes were different, cold and knowing. A chill ran down her spine as the truth settled in. The house hadn't let her go. She was still trapped, and she always would be.